Welcome to the American Citizens Abroad podcast. I'm Michelle, and today I'm chatting with Warren and Julie of Warren and Julie Travel. They are early retirement travelers who slow travel full-time, hosts of a YouTube channel with information on residency programs, how to be a nomad in Europe, and expat life in various countries. And they have a vlog and blog on their site, warrenjulietravel.com. Welcome. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Hey, we're happy to be here, Michelle.
Let's start with your history as global travelers and expats. Could you talk a bit about your story abroad?
Yes. So first off, we've been traveling for over 4 years now. We had planned our departure to become nomads going back, I guess, back to around 2009 or 10. We decided that we were going to look to live abroad. And when Julie and I realized after many exploratory trips that we couldn't agree on any place, we decided we would retire everywhere. And so we decided we would become nomads. And we put our efforts into saving and getting our financial house in order. And when our kids were able to be successfully launched, we decided that we would take off and start our trip. And we were going to start off with doing a trip through South America in 2020. And we had our first stop in Ecuador planned for March of 2020. And that turned out to be our first and last stop in South America because COVID came and we actually stayed in Ecuador for 9.5 months. But it turned out to be a good stop. We met a lot of people during the lockdown and during all of the chaos there. But every time we got a little bit of breathing room, we were out climbing volcanoes, exploring the Amazon jungle. And we started our YouTube channel and we learned more or less what we think expats and nomads are looking for as far as information. And we started at that point providing expat interviews to people on YouTube from the people we met, finding out what the budgets were, what their quality of life was like. We kind of kept that ball rolling. So after 9.5 months of being in Ecuador, where we had to continue to stay there due to the state of emergency, we hopped over to Europe in January of 2021. And we've been in Europe pretty much ever since, with just a couple trips back to the States. Last year, I had a couple personal reasons to go back, and Julie went back for the first time
in 3 years.
Yes, in 3 years in December. Anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell. We've been to 47 countries, yep. I think, right now, 45 for Julie, and our dogs that we travel with have been to 27 and 26 respectively. One had been to Canada, the other hadn't. So we rescued one when we were in Ecuador after our initial Chihuahua that we took with us. She was 15 and a half when she passed away down there after complications of old age. We adopted a dog from the shelter in Ecuador, and she's now won the lotto and travels with us.
You touched on it a bit, but can you expand on how you decided to slow travel full time?
We decided after quite a few trips being on vacation.
Well, we took trips to the Philippines. We took trips to Taiwan. We took trips to Panama.
Yeah, and we've been to Korea. And we went through Spain. And
we did 9 countries in Europe, one trip alone. And then another one we did nothing but Italy. And that's when we really said to ourselves, we really want to be in Europe. We love Europe, but we want to see other places as well. And we figured out we honestly just could not find one country to settle in. It was way before people called it slow matting or anything else. This was years ago.
We are very different people. Julie likes peace and quiet, serenity, cooler weather, the forest, the mountains. I like the beach, the heat, the sun. I like to be around people. I like to be around the center of activity. And so
we have to make it work.
We are pulled like taffy. I've got to try to compromise to please her and vice versa. We just find ourselves trying to go to each other's happy spaces.
And slow travel is so unique because you get an opportunity to really get to know people. There have been a couple times and instances where we've gotten a chance to actually meet people and become friends with people. And that just makes it very difficult to say goodbye sometimes. Or maybe you find that you're in a community where you just love the local markets and you love everything about it. And then suddenly it's like, well, I've got to go. It's been 90 days.
That's the downside to slow traveling. If you're somewhere for a month or two, the longer you stay, the harder it is sometimes to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned your dogs. I imagine it's difficult to travel with them. Can you explain how you make it work?
So we made it from the United States to Ecuador with our 2 Chihuahuas, which that's a big feat in itself. There's a lot of expense involved. You have to have a whole lot of vaccines. You have to have an international health certificate. All this stuff has to be very timely. And I actually have a detailed article on my blog about this. And then you get to the country, you've got to clear the agricultural inspector. Then you start your life there. When we left there, we had to repeat some of the same processes. We had to go and make sure the vaccines were up to date to return to the United States for 3 weeks to say goodbye to family before we left for years. So we had to go back through the same thing and have international health certificates issued. All this stuff had to be very timely. The United States has a lot of rules and regulations on this. So we got them back to the United States. Then it was time to figure out how to get them to Europe, which at the time we were very fortunate. Our big dog that we have now was much smaller, so we could still fit her in the cabin of the plane. And so we did a direct trip from JFK, New York to Belgrade, Serbia. But when we landed in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, we ended up taking a drive to say goodbye to family and friends and everything. So we took a drive from Fort Lauderdale to JFK, and the main reason all the way to JFK was so we could get a direct flight for our dogs. So it would make life easier for them because that's what we do. Honestly, Serbia happened to be the easiest country in all of Europe. I did tons of research and found out that they only wanted an international health certificate. They needed the rabies vaccine, and then we were in the country. That was the easiest airport ever to clear, and life began. After that, we're in the height of COVID. It was a hard time trying to get back and forth, but once we could, we got an EU pet passport, and that made life so much easier. And so traveling with them now isn't that difficult.
And so far in your travels, what destination has been your favorite and why?
I'm going to give my answer, which I don't know if it's the same as Julie's, but we bought a home in Montenegro in 2016, little country on the Adriatic. And that was going to be our home base where we were going to go from to explore Europe, come back to have a place that we can call home and change our clothes and spend a few months a year there and rent it out when we weren't there. But I had a picture of Montenegro up in my office, in my home office, and I looked at that every day. That was the curate to drive me forward. And so I had this love for this little country, Montenegro, the clean water, the most southern fjord in Europe, just the fairy tale feel of being inside the old town fortress where we owned our first home there. To me, I think I built it up to be so much in my brain that I have this very strong tie there, and I love going back to Montenegro. And there's a great expat community there that's very international, that's growing, people to get together with. So I feel a sense of community. I think if you first go to Montenegro, you're going to be stunned by the beauty and so many things about it. I think you really have to almost take a deeper long-term dive there to really get the full appreciation for the community, the people, the expat community as well. I think one stop in 1 week is not going to be enough for you to really feel what I feel for it. I think you really have to go in there and plan to stay a while, and then you'll discover what Montenegro is all about.
And we're asked this question pretty often. And for me, I can tell you that I really can't give you a top favorite. I can say that there are so many that tie in first place. My second favorite would absolutely be Turkey. I love Antalya. I love that beautiful coastline. I love it for the winter. So I'll preface saying that. I love it because it's a beautiful winter destination for me. I love the local markets. There's so much to love and appreciate. The shopping, the food, the people. The Turkish people are just amazing people. It's truly a destination for so many people to explore. Montenegro is definitely way up there on my list as well. It's a stunning country.
Let me mention real quickly, since Julie brought up Turkey, there's a couple countries that, coming from America, even though I considered myself well-traveled when we started this, I'd already been to 20 plus countries before I retired. And the idea of going to Turkey or to the country of Serbia was so far down on my list of things to do. And I had preconceived ideas of what I would be walking into, none of which were true. And Serbia and Turkey have turned out to be some of my favorite places to go. love the little city of Novi Sad in Serbia, as well as Zlatibor up in the mountains. Novi Sad is near the Hungarian border, a little bit north of Belgrade. The people there are just very nice and welcoming. A lot of them speak English. And then Turkey, I think I expected to walk into a Liam Neeson movie. When Julia twisted my arm to go to Turkey, I figured we'd go in there for a week and she'd say, okay, Warren, let's turn around. Let's go. Let's leave this place. And it was just so far from what I thought I was walking into. And we just ended up loving Turkey. We've been back there several times now for long stays, from Istanbul, Fethiye, which is a British expat hotspot, Antalya, Alanya. There's a lot of places to really appreciate there. I am partial towards the Mediterranean coast on the western side of the country. Istanbul is great as well.
I agree.
Are there any destinations that you feel have been underrated and deserve to be on a traveler's destination list?
Well, we're sitting in Saranda, Albania right now. It took us a while to come back this direction. In 2018, we did a quick trip through the northern part of Albania, and to say I was less than impressed would be an understatement. So we weren't in a hurry to come back, but we had a lot of friends that had traveled through this area of Saranda, and it's really turned out to be quite charming as well. This is another one of these places that I think a lot of people might not think about going to, that maybe they should. And we see that the property prices are going up here considerably as well. So I guess it's not really a secret anymore.
Oh, no.
I'm not speaking for the whole country of Albania, but specifically for the Saranda area is getting a lot of attention. A pretty good expat community here, some decent beaches in the area. And I don't know how much the audience here knows about Schengen. Schengen, Americans are allowed to be in a zone of 29 countries that this year included Romania and Bulgaria, and last year they added in Croatia. And you can only be in the entire zone of 29 countries 90 days every 180 days. And most of the countries Americans think about are in the Schengen, excluding the UK, Ireland, and then some of the Balkan countries and Ukraine. So having a place in Albania makes it a very easy place to jump over to, since you can be in Albania as an American for pretty much 12 months without any special paperwork. And so if you want to do what we call the Schengen Shuffle, you can go, if you wanted to, buy a house in Italy, live there for 90 days, take a ferry over to Albania, stay here for 91 days, turn around and go back and split your time between two countries, or anywhere else in Europe. Because if you take the ferry into Italy, you could take the train to basically anywhere in Europe. And so it's a great place for a Schengen Shuffle location that's affordable, and the quality of life here is quite good, and the expat community is really outstanding here. And I guess I should mention, some people maybe think I'm traveling, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of Americans or expats. And expats in this area and many areas are made up of many different nationalities. And oftentimes the natives of the country join into the activities of the expat community. So if you really want to be able to meet locals, being part of the expat community opens those doors so you can get out and have adventures together and meet other people. Because typically the locals in the community are not saying, hey there, Mr. Foreigner, let me stop everything I'm doing, forget about my family and all my friends that I've had for my entire life, and embrace you and spend all my time with you. That doesn't happen. So if you really want to get to know the locals, getting into the community that has these activities and meeting the locals that are part of this foreign community is a way to open the doors.
What has surprised you most about living a slow travel lifestyle? Do you have any insider tips about living in this way?
When you start this journey, you say to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm moving to Europe. This is incredible. Every day is going to be a fantasy world. And then reality hits, and you still have your laundry to do, and you still have your dishes to do. You still have grocery shopping and all the mundane activities of life, but you're so blessed that you get a chance to see so much, so many different cultures, so many different people, so many different foods you get to taste, and you get to truly get to know what the rest of the world is like. So I would say that slow travel for us has been tremendously fun time, but at the same time, we've had our moments too, from little illnesses here or there. There are surprises around certain corners.
Julie and I, we did a lot of research and practice trips before we retired and before we decided to go and explore places. I think it's imperative that before you jump out to become a nomad, that you take some exploratory trips, see what the world is like before you sell everything and decide you're going to go get a car, drive around Europe like we're doing without testing the waters first, without knowing what it's going to actually be like in a country. We had a couple that had never left America that decided that they were going to sell everything, come over to Europe, buy a car, and go through the same process Julie and I have so we can drive our car around Europe. And they came over with their dog. They spent a ton of money. The wife and the couple had never really spent time away from her boys that were college age. And after 2 months, she was having a breakdown. Europe wasn't what she was expecting. I think she was expecting the fairy tale world, not realizing that, hey, this is a real place where people live and not everything is perfect. If you're not ready to separate from your family, you need to know that ahead of time before you take big steps and sell everything and put your financial life basically at risk,
Right.
because you didn't do the research or you didn't know what you were really desiring.
Right. And I think the tips there would be, you know what you're getting into, number one. And number two, one of the things that I've started pushing a lot in our YouTube channel is that have a little bit of extra money in case something goes awry, and $2,000 per person in case you have to fly back to the United States unexpectedly, because we know people this happened to and they scramble to be able to afford to do it. And that's not how you want to live. I would say those would be our two tips about slow traveling, moving abroad. Be prepared, be ready for this, and do your research.
Podcasts like what you're doing are very important. But if you're going to get on YouTube and look at some things, you should look at some slow traveling videos. Julie and I do a lot of slow traveling videos and show what life is like to actually live somewhere, not just the vacation hype. If all you're doing is watching Kara and Nate and some of these people that are going in and doing 2 or 3 days in a place and just having the time of their life and just on constant vacation and go mode, that won't be the reality. It's better that you understand what it's going to actually be like in real life. It's also a lot less expensive when you're going at a slower pace. If you're trying to live like, and I say Kara and Nate because I respect them, they're good people. There's also Dablin Travels. These are huge channels that are promoting this fast-paced vacation lifestyle. But if you're living that lifestyle, you're going to burn out, you're going to go broke. And if you are trying to do this on a budget, slow traveling is where it's at. You're going to be able to get the breaks on your Airbnbs for staying over a month instead of having to pay the high cost for a day and the constant plane tickets. We go by car, so that gives us the freedom to come and go and cross land borders versus taking planes everywhere. And that's a choice also because we have dogs, so that's easier for us to get around with our little friends than trying to put them in planes constantly. Research-wise, make sure you're looking at realistic ideas of what you're getting into. Just don't get caught into the vacation hype videos.
And have you met many other Americans who are digital nomads or part of a travel nomad community? Are there online groups or anything along those lines that keep those in these communities connected?
We meet a lot of expats. We do a lot of videos with them too, and interviews of their quality of life, their cost of living. But there's Facebook groups. You put in almost any city in the world of any decent size or where there's going to be people, and you put in foreigners in X city or expats in whatever city it is, and you're going to find Facebook groups with people in there. And it's easy to meet people through those types of venues. But also there's co-working spaces down in Antalya, Turkey, for example, that have all kinds of social engagements for the folks down there. We know a guy named Alex down there runs the place, and he does a fantastic job with probably about 150 different nomads, plus a lot of locals in the community interacting with Turkish people. They get out, they do all kinds of dinners, going out to different events and activities. So if you're going out there to work, you can have a lot of playtime and meet a lot of people to network. Also in Bansko, Bulgaria, there's the co-working space out there. A guy named Matthias is running, and he's done a wonderful job with that. Bansko's a place in the mountains of Bulgaria that is a ski area, but it's also great in the summertime for mountain biking and river rafting. And he's got a lot of activities for the people at that co-working space to get together and network. So that's a good way to grow your base. So if you're a digital nomad and you're looking for that co-working environment, those are two ideal places to go to. And Bansko, Bulgaria every year has the Digital Nomad Fest. They get typically, I think 500, 600 came last year.
They're thinking about 700 will come this year.
And that's typically in July.
And you touched on some of these issues and some tips when it comes to living this lifestyle. Are there any other issues or difficulties within the digital nomad travel community about living abroad, specifically for Americans?
I would say specifically for anyone, but Americans especially, and that would be loneliness, because you can actually become very lonely. And we see a lot of things with a lot of these Facebook groups. They'll actually say, especially the digital nomad communities, they're traveling alone. I'll see them in there saying, I'm lonely. What do I do about this life? It's very strange. I don't have my family around the corner. I don't have people I know. And that's why actually getting out there and meeting people and growing your community through Facebook groups, meetup.com, all these different things is the way to go. You need to actually get out there. Otherwise, you're going to feel alone and without anything. We did a video on the loneliness of people and what to do when you are lonely or to combat loneliness as a nomad.
We actually have interviewed several solo nomad travelers of various ages, and it's amazing that some people are built to do this stuff solo. We interviewed an 80-year-old nomad that we just released the video on 2 days ago, and he is traveling the world by himself, and he is knocking off his bucket list. I guess he started this at 78. He's now going on 81, and he's doing this solo. He's never been married, so some people are able to cope with doing things alone. Other people think it's a great idea till they're actually doing it. Get to know these expat groups to meet up with people. But also let me speak again about the Schengen. If you're talking about hurdles and issues for digital nomads, or nomads in particular, if you are going to come to Europe and Europe is a focus of your travel, you need to understand the Schengen and the restrictions of the Schengen. And I touched on that earlier. This is going to apply to Australians, to Brits, to anybody that's not an EU citizen or in the Schengen, one of the Schengen countries, that you need to understand where you can be and where you can't be after 90 days, and that you can't just jump the border from France to Spain and get a new 90 days. That's part of the same grouping. So you need to consider the Schengen zone as one country. So all 29 of those countries, just think of them as one country, just like you have 50 states in America. Just think of 29 countries that are states in the Schengen zone. And that's the simplest way to think about it. You leave for 90 days, then you can go back for 90 days. But the day in and day out, if you're going to just one country, count as the same day for each of those countries. So you have to find one third country to go to, unless you're going to Albania, which lets you stay for 12 months. Then you can come and go stay in Albania for 91 days and then go back for a fresh 90 days.
Do you think organizations like ACA provide value to U.S. citizens overseas who are living the travel nomad, digital nomad lifestyle?
It's good that there's somebody out there advocating to look out for these citizens abroad. I think so. I think a lot of people don't realize how many Americans are living abroad. We hear about how many people are in America that are foreigners, but you don't always hear about I think it's somewhere between 3 and 5 million people that are Americans that are residing or working or moving around outside the country in one capacity or another on a regular basis. And you may not have the same people looking out for you as if you were living in the States or in a location inside the United States. So it's good to have somebody raising the voice for the voiceless, basically.
What tips would you give someone who is thinking about slow traveling and living this type of lifestyle?
Go look at our YouTube channel, Warren Julie Travel, of course. Expat Nomads, we've been putting out a lot of valuable information there with telling people how to get a car if they wanted to travel through Europe, and how to get your dogs around if need be, and trying to give information about what to actually expect as far as a budget if you're going somewhere. We even give our own budgets, but my tip is going to be that you research and go in with your eyes wide open, understand the reality and not the fantasy, and look for information that is based in reality. Don't just look for the stuff that's going to give you rainbow color glasses.
All the drone footage that makes everything look amazing, and then right around the corner might not be just quite what you were expecting.
And if you're not mentally understanding what you're walking into, if you just see all these pretty things, once you get to somewhere, you can look around, you see all the pretty things in 30 minutes, and then you're like, now what? You have to understand what you're looking at, and if that's going to fill your time, and how you're going to fill your day when you're not doing the tourist stuff nonstop.
Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would not change our decision to travel.
Definitely not.
This has been a great experience, and I encourage it for anybody that has this dream to do it, but I want you to do it right.
Well, we had a harder struggle than a lot of people because we left in the height of COVID, or actually the beginning of COVID. So it was tough with the pandemic coming, and we had to struggle to get to Ecuador, so we had a little bit different reality than those who are starting now.
I think we were literally the last people allowed into Ecuador when they closed the country down on March 15th, because that's the day we went in, pretty much the last flight. They took all the other Americans off our plane, and they only let us in because we told them we sold everything, we have nowhere to go.
So I think my thought there would be, prepare yourself for what you don't know could happen or may happen or may be around the corner.
Just don't go in without doing your research. That's the best thing you can do, is make sure you are researching this before you pull the trigger. Just don't go out on a whim without knowing what you're up against. It's a lot of fun, but there are challenges.
Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
The American Citizens Abroad podcast is a monthly podcast that is published the second Tuesday of each month. It is edited and produced by me, Michelle, and is a product of American Citizens Abroad. You can find us on Twitter at ACA_podcast, on Facebook at American Citizens Abroad Podcast, or you can email us at podcast@americansabroad.org. Remember, give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts so other Americans living abroad can find us.